In The Long Walk, 50 people are forced to compete in a competition walking along for a speed of 3 miles an hour, or else they'll face deadly consequences. Hello and welcome Cinema, where we focus on the film. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought of The Long Walk. If you've seen it, do you like it, do you not like it, or is it somewhere right in the middle? Or if you're waiting for this review to decide if you're going to see it or not, and taking it right in the positive, there's just so much about The Long Walk that I couldn't express, that it's just brutal within the nature that it goes about, and for a big time studio that's releasing this project, it goes to certain measures that's more than I would have expected for this type of thing. What we get out of Francis Lawrence's direction is just incredible, who has previous done the Hunger Games movie. So this is a similar style competition series, but this is very long stretch and taking on new environments now and then with so many different ways of progressing throughout the film. And despite maintaining a pretty lengthy runtime at 2 hours and 20 minutes, it very much doesn't necessarily feel like it's that length, or at least every minute maintains its course to feeling like it is sustaining its measures to the proper amount of what you need out of it, where you really progress throughout the story. You study all these minute characters that is really progressing throughout. Mark Hamill is just great as the leader of the group. He doesn't have a huge role, but he still has a pretty prominent role for where you're leading, reminding you of his presence throughout, that is leading on throughout the idea of this military force that is pushing them on. And we're just getting a lot out of David Johnson, out of Cooper Huffman, that those two leading members just have a lot of heart, a lot of emotional moments. The conversation that begins between them just leads on throughout so many ideas, so many different philosophical, thought-provoking moments within the conversation, within the political commentary that kind of goes into, while not being too forceful, but while not choosing a left or right side of how things work. It's just the general humanitarian values of how people operate, the ideas that people can be very rough, very brooding within the ways of being able to just kill someone in cold blood, and the way you follow about that, the brutality that coincides with it, is just enforcing in just the strongest of ways. It's horrific because of how real it feels, of how real it looks, and just the general atmosphere is just a natural location, yet they're walking along so well in this long walk that you're seeing so many different environments because it's a long stretch, obviously, and tracking by the numbers that you're seeing on screen, over 200 miles, being able to follow along with that. And even though the trailer sort of spoils a general gist of what you're getting on, not necessarily spoiler as a bad thing, but just giving you a taste of what you're getting out of it, the still shock value out of what it ultimately looks like, and the way you're paying off all of the brutality and leading on to the one surviving member of what is going on in this competition race, you expect it to be as predictable as it could seem, but there's still many different outcomes, many different motivations that lead people to desperation along the way, that lead to different circumstances that take them out of the game, that leads on to so many different things that deviates the story in even some ways you may expect, but it's not necessarily as easy to watch just because the general scope of the idea of the presence of the military and the symbolism behind everything of government or other control that is all being enforced upon them, and leading on to just side supporting characters that coincide with the main two leads, with David Johnson, Cooper Hoffman. There's just a great cast that really blends itself well together. You're getting a good number of about 10 people that are strongly supporting. And of course, within the 50 people, you can't touch on every person's life, touch on every connection that you can get with it. So of course, there's some connections you don't necessarily get to sympathize with directly, but you still feel the shock because of that first death that leads on to so many more, and just the idea of what it pays off to. The sound works well and integrates itself within what we get out of the soundtrack. While it is kind of subtle to some general extreme, the story itself and what we're following on with the characterization of the story and the characters themselves, there's not a whole lot of complexity to that story, making it generally easy to follow, full of ideas and messages within the conversations and dialogues that the humans have. But that just makes it more thought provoking, more strong within what it's doing with the simplicity of the story, because it just has that much more of an impact, a gut wrenching just moment here and there throughout many different things, leading on to so many emotional, devastational losses, even with those that they may not develop just as well. It's just the humane type of idea that these people are dying. Yes, it is fiction in this particular case, but we don't want to desensitize that in this day and age, especially upon recent events with the release of this film. Being able to witness this in its own form of story is just so good and well portrayed, which is also bad in the best ways possible because of the strengths and weaknesses that is shown within humanity, the measures to which people are taking, but also the friendships you get along the way within everything that you're coinciding with these two main actors, and coinciding with a flashback of our lead character that you start off with, things that went on in his past that gives him motive, leads on to strengths that you can coincide, sympathize, maybe connect with different ideas with his character, but also getting combating forces with his friend and other people that are sort of strengthening each other along the way, trying to decide if the support of each other is worth it at certain points, because they all have to keep walking no matter what until one remains. But the general idea and gist behind it is as harrowing as it becomes, but the conversations, the friendship makes it that much more connective just by meeting them all for the first time and feeling like you're immersed within this environment. And the landscape to this film, like I said, it goes to multiple different environments. And while it has a generally natural setting, it's going throughout some cities, a lot of countryside, and that's where there's different moments where it flashes through some of the miles that they pass through, and just goes coincides with different things that the passing of time, going to different days that they have to walk through the night, have different resting stops that they don't show on screen. But the ability to navigate everything that's going about is surprisingly well versed within the way they maintain its focus, being able to feel like it's as lengthy as it should within the timeline it does, but still sustaining a generally just over 2 hour runtime, is incredible for the way Francis Lawrence directs this film, and the landscape itself looks great. Not necessarily gorgeous to an utmost scale, but still incredible with all the shots they do in between, making it look clever, making it look good, showing that there's a directorial experience, showing that there's a good camera work, a shot for cinematography that really follows about along the way. There's just different gruesome moments within not only the deaths, but in the way people go through defecation or things that they have to excrete their body fluids in different ways that becomes so interesting by the ways that I had questions what they would show, because this is sort of a more down to earth natural story that you kind of expect those things to come out, since they have to be walking for so many days or however long they sustain themselves. And that just comes to light in some of the strongest ways, not too overly revealing, but there are moments here and there that do not hide anything that is really the strongest suit, even if it shows us it for a brief glimpse. it's just so strong within that visceral environment that sets up as a whole, making it to be so much more powerful. And knowing that it comes from the author of Stephen King, love his work. I haven't read as much of his books themselves, nor have I read this particular book on its own, so I don't have much to compare on, of course. So that made all the experience that much more surprising. But because of the impact, even though there's not a ton to go off what the narrative of this story is to begin with, it just becomes generally one of my favorite and possibly one of the best films that can compliment to come out of this year. Just generally horrifying and gruesome, especially upon the time of this release and recent shootings that have occurred. So let's just take it into the mix element, to which there's some things I have to address that may not work for some people and have been a little mixed with me. Taking on the look of the Major, played by Mark Hamill, I felt like there could have been a little bit more characterization, and also looking at the plot itself, how the story flows on all the way throughout. It flows pretty well until it goes into some of the flashback moments, which isn't a bad scene, but it kind of still disrupts part of the flow that is otherwise straightforward, staying on with the continuous story. While it reveals important information, a disruption can throw some people off, and felt like it sent mixed feelings of taking me out of the immersive story. But there's just things here and there that could throw people off. Of course, it may be overly gruesome. It's not a film you can go to expecting a fun horror movie, expecting something that may be light on the way you're expecting a war type of film with gun violence and everything. It doesn't desensitize it at all. You should immerse yourself in one sense to this type of thing, but it's not a film you should go to in order to escape from reality of this world, whether this time or any time. But it still has a strength to it that can also be its greatest weakness to some. And some characters, if you are not getting into the dialogue, if you are not as compelled by their thoughtful conversations, some people just won't connect to that personally based on what they personally perceive, what they want out of the film as a whole. So there's just could be some disconnect in that regard. And of course, those that have read the book themselves have a thing to compare off of. So maybe I would really be open in the comments below for you to let me know if you read the book and how does it compare to this film itself. Because me having not read it, there's so much openness to what it could have been like. And obviously, films can dramatize film in a way that the books don't, be able to have that visualization of all these gruesome murders. People have to use their own imagination, but visualizing it to this extreme could be that much more dramatic, or there's just other uses to the characterization that may be different as a whole. So that's just my personal thoughts on The Long Walk, which I have to rate a simply 9.5 out of 10. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought of The Long Walk. Was it good? Was it bad? Or somewhere right in the middle? Let me know all your thoughts of one of my favorite films of the year just far. And make sure to like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe if you haven't already to join in film culture community where we talk about love of cinema as a whole. So that's just all, and make sure to do yourself a favor and go watch a movie.